Hi, I'm Shonda Ramsey, your host and fellow indie author. Are you overwhelmed at the thought of publishing your book by yourself? Has fear kept you frozen in place, unable to write even the first word of your book? Not knowing the steps you need to take shouldn't stop you from writing. That's why I've asked for help from some amazing industry professionals, published authors, and others who are in the same situation as you to share their knowledge on the self-publishing process. Welcome to Dear Indie Author, where we inspire creative independence in every writer. Hey everyone, I am here with my friend TC. TC, I would love to get started with some rapid fire icebreaker questions. Are you ready for those?
I'm ready or not, let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite food?
Pizza.
Hmm. Who is your hero?
My dad.
Love that. Do you prefer to handwrite or type?
Ooh, handwrite.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
What is your favorite writing spot?
Kitchen table.
Do you like to work or play?
People would choose work. I definitely would choose play, I think.
I don't know. Some days I think I choose work more than play, but
Oh,
yeah.
not me. Not me.
What is your favorite writing snack?
Oh, almonds?
It's the power food.
Yeah.
Do you like to write in silence or with music?
I like silence.
Hmm. See, I gotta have music. What is your favorite song?
Favorite song. Ooh. You say Lauren Daigle.
That's a great song. Are you an Apple or Android user?
Apple.
All the way.
No, yeah, no question.
What makes you smile?
My children.
Oh, I love that. What is your favorite board game?
Monopoly.
That's a great game. What is one word to describe your writing style?
Nostalgic.
Mm, that's a good word. I love that. Well, welcome, TC. I'm so glad that you are here. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a husband and a dad. I'm also a corporate employee, and recently I've also become an author and a podcaster. So I started about a year ago. I started working on my debut novel after years of putting it off. And as I started sharing that with people around me, I realized there were so many people in my network who were doing cool things like writing books or starting businesses. And I remember in one of those conversations just thinking like, there's got to be a way to get this encouragement and this
Mm,
excitement and this creative energy out to more people. So I
yeah,
didn't set out to write a book and start a podcast at the same time, but that's kind of what's happened. So I'm having a lot of fun with both, but it hasn't been without its struggles. So
that's pretty awesome. I like that. You've completed the rough draft of your book. Is that correct?
that's right. I did. Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about the story and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a work of fiction, but it's connected to a group of people in a place that are really close to me. So it's a story of friendship and growing up, and it follows the lives of a group of young men in that kind of transition season after high school and before the rest of their life begins. And so I grew up in the mountains of Virginia and formed some of the best friendships that I still have even today with a group of guys in between these two mountains in a river valley, just fishing every day. And that summer, kind of after high school and before college. And you're just thinking a lot about kind of the, seasons of transition and how so much growth and so much kind of goodness of life happens in that intersection
Mhm.
between the big seasons of life. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's all about. So it is a fiction book, but it's it pulls pretty heavily on some real experiences and real relationships that I have with some of my best friends.
That's really neat. So that's pretty cool that you are honoring them in that way too. I
Yeah,
know I write a little bit of fiction too, and I've tried to create characters based around some people that I know too, loosely, very loosely.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really neat that you do that. What do you hope readers will take away from your book?
Yeah, so this is about a group of friends who form and kind of their friendship that lasts throughout really all of their adult life. And I think if there's one thing that I hope readers take away, it's that through all of the challenges in life, it's one of the most important things you can do is treasure and value those relationships that mean most to you. So that I
Yeah,
think is one thing that I hope people will take away.
that's really awesome. You have described yourself as an aspiring author. What was the turning point that made you finally decide to pursue it?
Okay, so yeah, this is a good one because it took me decades. I've always had the idea. I've always wanted to write, and for whatever reason, I just had this kind of this kind of false dichotomy of what my options were. So I thought that I could either continue down the corporate path and
Mm.
do that until I retire or whatever, or I could quit my job and go move to a cabin in the woods and become a writer. And in my mind, those were the only two options that existed. And so, the way that I've described it is like just going down the corporate path and never writing did not sound very fun, but
Yeah.
quitting my job and becoming a writer didn't sound very feasible. So it was kind of like, well, you've got to pay the bills, you got to provide for your family. So writing is just going to have to be a dream that dies.
Mm.
And around this time, actually last year. So I think I heard you mention on one of your episodes that you like to use kind of your birthday as a reflection time and a time to set
I
goals and
do.
do some. So I'm the same way. And so my birthday is, around my birthday last year, I just started kind of thinking about life and how are things going and are there any changes I want to make. And around the same time, I got an encouraging email from a friend that was kind of one of those, hey, you should go for it kind of emails. And I was also reading the book Atomic Habits that my
Mhm.
mother-in-law loaned to me that was just kind of
Great book.
about, habit formation, habit stacking, all of that. And so those three things kind of converged at the same time. And it just kind of felt like, okay, I've got to give this a shot, if for no other reason than to ward off the regret that I might feel later for not doing it. So
Right.
that was really kind of the catalyst was my birthday and kind of some of those events surrounding it.
That's awesome. I feel like good things happen around our birthdays, especially as we
For
get older.
sure. Yeah,
We got to chase those dreams. That's what I say. Life is short the older we get.
that's right.
Can you share what it felt like the first time you called yourself a writer?
Oh yeah. So I remember the moment that it happened. I was in a work Zoom call and there were all these different tiles on the screen, 20 or 30 people on my team. And at the beginning of the meeting, we were doing one of those kind of, hey, introduce yourself, share a fun fact. And other people were kind of doing their thing. And I had this kind of nudge, this thought, like when it's my turn, I'm going to share that I'm a writer,
Mm.
that I'm writing a book. But I had this internal wrestle of like, no, you can't do that. You're just getting started. Like, how dare you kind of thing. But I remember saying like, hey, my name's TC and I've been with the company for a number of years, whatever. And then I said, and I'm working on my first book. And I remember seeing, watching the tiles on the Zoom call, and you can tell instantly like the people who lean in and light up
Yeah.
and kind of like these are your allies, right?
Yeah.
Indeed, these are the people who followed up with me after and said, "Tell me about your book. Like, I'd love to
Oh,
read
that's
it."
awesome.
Yeah, so it was a surreal moment of like, I battled with the imposter syndrome of like, you can't really call yourself that. But in the end, it was one of the best feelings is just saying it out loud.
Oh, that's awesome. What has been the most surprising part of being an aspiring author so far?
Okay, so I think the most surprising part for me is it's kind of a twofold. So on the one hand, how easy and naturally writing can be sometimes when you're feeling inspired and in the zone, like, I've heard people say the book kind of writes itself. Like I've
Yeah.
definitely had that experience. But then at the same time, like the overall process of, getting the draft done, but then everything else that has to come along with that when you think about editing and ARC readers and beta readers and which way do you go publishing and what does that all look
Yeah.
like? Like I'm still learning so much in that world. I think that's been one of the things that I wasn't quite prepared for, all the details and all the work that goes into all of that.
All the steps. It's more than just writing a book.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much. Let's talk about your podcast. So, your podcast is called Yet Podcast, and it
That's
focuses
right.
on encouraging and inspiring others. How did starting this influence your writing as well?
Well, it's interesting because I started off, I started writing first. And then as I was telling friends, coworkers, family, hey, I'm writing a book, a lot of them were those who did lean in. And it almost felt like my sharing my writing journey with them gave them permission to tell me about the thing they were doing. So I would just be having coffee with someone and say, hey, I'm working on a book. And someone would say, oh my gosh, I'm doing a book too. Let me tell you about mine. And
Yeah.
I just remember, just be so exciting and encouraging. So that is actually what led me to do the podcast. But what's been interesting is as I've interviewed entrepreneurs, creatives, and specifically other writers, I've learned so much from the guests that I bring on my show because I
Mhm.
I always want to ask them, hey, what tools or techniques have you leaned into that have helped you as a writer? Or what books or podcasts or other resources would you recommend? And so I'm like, I'm doing that for my audience, right? For my listeners, but
Yeah.
also secretly, I'm like taking notes too. Like, oh, got to go
Right.
read this book, got to go listen to this podcast. So it's been really cool to kind of see. And I've talked to people kind of all across the board as far as, some are querying traditional, some are doing hybrid publishing, others
Mhm.
are full indie. So just, and I'm learning so much about all of those different avenues too. And so that's one of the things that I think was kind of an unintended blessing, I guess, of getting to talk to all these great people,
Yeah.
hear their stories, and then, pick up on a lot, like lean into some of the lessons they've learned so that I don't maybe make the same mistakes or, I can leverage some of that great stuff that they've learned through years and sometimes decades of writing.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some really amazing people out there who are in this whole industry that we are in. And I think it's really neat to hear everyone's perspectives because everybody is so different. Like
Yeah,
just when I think it's going to be something I've heard before, it never is. It's always something different, which is
that's
just
right.
amazing. What has been the most rewarding experience you have had since starting the Yet podcast?
So I think one of the questions that I like to ask on my show is what is the most encouraging thing someone's ever said to you? And so I think for creatives, writers, painters, artists, anybody who creates something, I think a lot of us struggle with imposter syndrome and that
Mm.
feeling of like, who am I to do this thing? And I've become convinced that encouragement is one of the key ingredients that can keep us going. And so one of the things that I love, and it's always a great answer when someone shares a story of a teacher who invested in them as a young
Mm.
child, or a parent who, looked at their work and said, "You are really good at this." Like I just get chills hearing those
Yeah.
stories of like, because oftentimes I don't think we maybe realize it when we're encouraging other people or offering a kind word about someone's work, they may be at that critical point where they're, this is a fork in the road where they're either going to give it up forever or they're going to become, that published author that they've always dreamed of
Yeah.
becoming. And that word that you offer can make a difference. Like to me, that's just such a cool part of, I mean, really just kind of the human experience in general, but particularly creating art.
Yeah.
Um, and I get to kind of have a front row seat of that through my podcast, which is so
Pretty
cool.
awesome. Yeah.
It's
It's
amazing. Yeah,
awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your actual writing process. Since we're talking about sharing tips and tricks, we're going to get into that a
sure.
little bit. Can
Yeah.
you describe what your writing process looks like?
Well, so yeah, so at the beginning, I didn't have much of a process. At the beginning, it was, ride the wave of inspiration and just put everything on it was a Google Doc for me at the beginning. And so I would, but I did in, thinking through, I'd just come off reading Atomic Habits. So I did think through like, okay, I want to get up at a certain time. I want to write for a certain time period and track my progress every day. So
Mhm.
I kind of built that discipline early on of, I'm already getting up early. I'm kind of a morning person. And so I'm going to dedicate, whether it's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, what I don't remember what I did, but like every day I'm writing a couple hundred words and just stacking that on top until eventually you've got a little bit of a story.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that I've realized here recently is that the wave of inspiration is not always, you can't always ride that every day, right? Like some
Yeah.
days you're going to feel far more inspired and energized than others. And so one of the things that I actually just recently recorded an episode that I'm going to share soon on my show is about capturing your ideas. And
Mm.
so that's one thing that I've started to do. I use multiple collection systems because those ideas, if you're like me, it would be great if you sit down, open your laptop, and that's when you get all your good ideas. But for
Yeah.
me, I get them, at 3 a.m. when I wake up for a glass of water or when
Yeah.
I'm out walking the dog or driving down the interstate. So I've got a notes app on my phone. I've got the voice recorder. I've got a little
Hmm.
journal where I write things down, like all these different collection systems. And then I kind of regularly funnel them into a spreadsheet that I can then categorize and tag and search so that when I get to that dedicated time slot where, okay, now it's time to write, if I'm not feeling inspired, I can kind of draw on that reservoir of
And
ideas that I've built up over, the course of that week or month.
that's pretty awesome. Do you still find that you choose the Google Doc method for writing your manuscript, or have you moved on to something different?
I've moved on. So talking about my podcast and the guests that I bring on, many of them have recommended Scrivener. And
Yeah.
for the longest time, I'm like, I'm on a budget here, guys. So I don't want to spend money on anything. So I will do like the free trials of things and then then decide if I like them or not. But I recently had another birthday. My mom, hi mom, gave me some money. And so I invested in Scrivener and I'm like, I'll never look back. I love it.
Yeah. I use
Yeah.
Scrivener as well. I love
It's
it.
it's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you color code now?
I haven't gotten there. No, I'm just a week into it. So I'm just like to the point where I'm doing the note cards and moving things around. And even that to me is worth the price. I
Yeah.
haven't even gotten to color coding.
Just
I'm
wait
ready
till
to
you
do.
color code your characters and then you
Can't
can
wait.
see who's speaking. So mine always has multiple point of views. I switch. So
Okay.
I color code so I know whose POV it is.
Oh,
But
that's awesome.
Scrivener's amazing. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yes.
Definitely. What has been the biggest challenge in completing your first draft manuscript and how did you overcome that?
So I'm tempted to give the easy answer, which is imposter syndrome, because I say this on my show, like every guest that I've interviewed, I ask them this question, and almost all of them say imposter syndrome. So I'm going to not give that answer. I think one of the other challenges that I've had is time management. So
Um,
I have a full-time job. I have a wife. I have 3 young children who are in sports and school and other activities. But the thing that I've always said is people prioritize the things that mean the most and that they want to do. So everyone has the same 24 hours in a day.
mhm.
It's just a matter of where you invest that time. So, you know, thinking about, well, I don't necessarily need to watch, 2 hours a night of Netflix, for example. I can
Yeah.
maybe cut that back, cut that in half, and then I've got time to write. Or getting up 30 minutes earlier or things like that. So it's just and really having that inventory of where your time is going. You
Mm.
can also identify some of those hidden moments too, right? Because I think about writing as like, okay, I got pour my coffee, light my candle. If you're Shonda, you turn on your music, right? You do all that stuff. But it doesn't always have to be that. It can be 5 minutes in line at the grocery store, or it
Yeah.
can be while you're going 70 miles down the interstate, right? Like, I mean, I'm not advocating people pull out their phones while they're driving. But there is hidden time built in all of our days, and you can lean into that and leverage that too, even if it's just,
Yeah.
pecking out a couple sentences with your thumbs while you're in line. Like that still counts.
Yeah.
So just kind of having that inventory of where the time goes and then fitting in little bits of writing when you can.
Yeah. I have a friend who old school has the recorder, the old
Yeah.
recorder, and would just
Yeah.
turn that on when driving. So if they had a long commute, they would just hit record and set it close to them and they would just talk. Almost like they were
Yeah.
telling the story and
Oh,
then
I love that. Yeah.
type it up
And
when they got back.
love it. And a benefit of that, right? Like that gives you the same utility as the voice recorder on your phone
Yeah.
without all the other distractions of your
Yeah.
phone, right? Which is
Yeah.
a huge time killer for probably a lot of people.
Yeah. 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 That's one reason too why I like Scrivener is it has that mode where you can turn all that off and not have any distractions. But yeah, during my writing time, everything has to be off. I have a dedicated laptop strictly for writing, so there is
Nice.
nothing signed in.
Nice.
That way I can stay focused. What advice do you have for someone who is just starting out with writing?
Think one of the things that I try to encourage people is you're gonna hear lots of advice from other people. there's going to be, there's certain ways to write, there's craft to writing, and I think you probably can and should learn as much as you can. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's your story, it's your work. And so that's one of the great things about creating something is you kind of get to decide what it looks like. And so
Yeah.
if so I always encourage people like listen to the podcasts, read the books, consume, learn as much as you can, take what works for you. But if something doesn't work for you, don't feel like you have to, fit it into those guardrails. Like there are,
Yeah.
there's conventional wisdom, and there's a reason why conventional wisdom exists, but it's not a one size fits all. Have fun with the work that you're doing, and remember it's your story, it's your work, so you get to decide what it looks like.
Love that. I love leaning into authenticity. That's speaking my language for sure.
Yeah,
I think that that's important. A lot of people like to try to hit all the different tropes, which is great, but still don't lose yourself and, make sure you share your story. I like
for
that.
sure. Yeah.
What common challenges do you think aspiring authors face, and how do you think they could overcome them?
Hmm. Well, I think honestly, I know I've said this before, but I think imposter syndrome is one. I think feeling like you don't have time is another. Um, I think for both of those, you can get around other people who are in the trenches, who are maybe a little bit ahead of you, or maybe in the same stage as you. And I think we should remind each other why we're doing this and that it is worth doing,
Mm-hmm.
because along this road there's going to be discouragement, and there's going to be, obstacles that you'll need to overcome, and they can sometimes be enough to crush you and to have you kind of throw in the towel and say, you know what, this nobody's going to read this thing, or it's not worth, the time that I'm putting in, or I haven't seen the success that I thought I might. But I think hearing voices from other authors, other writers, other creatives to kind of cheer you on and encourage you, and remind you that you are good at what you're doing and your story is
Yeah.
worth telling, I think is so, so important. And it's hard because writing, a lot of times when people think of writing, they think of it as a kind of a solitary activity. And in some ways it is.
Yeah.
I think we've got to get around other people and be encouraging one another.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with that too. Let's talk about tools. What is your must-have tool for writing that you would pick? If you could pick just one and it's the one that everybody should use, what would it be?
Well, okay, so and I'm assuming like things like coffee are not in scope for this question, because that'd probably be my number one. Um, yeah, I don't know. If we're going writing on the computer, which it sounds like most people probably do, Scrivener is it now for me. I'm all in
Yeah.
on Scrivener. But if not, if we're talking writing with, on paper, I love a nice sharp wooden pencil. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
old school with like I use the mechanical pencils. I use pens every now and then, but I there's something about just that feel of like a nice wooden pencil.
Number two.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that. It is funny. I have a mechanical pencil sitting next to me that I used yesterday, and I'm like, this thing does not write like how
It's
I
just not the
remember
same.
pencils
It's
writing.
not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Can you share a piece of encouragement or advice that has been particularly impactful for you?
So this isn't explicit advice well, yeah, it's not explicit advice, but it's more of a vibe that I got early on. So I remember one time I was hanging out with some friends watching a basketball game, and one of the people there was he was a published author, super creative guy, like probably one of the smartest, most creative people that I've ever known. And
Mhm.
I remember I kind of in my mind, I had him in a different category of human. Like he was
Mhm.
just super creative, super smart. Like I said, already published books and all that. And I kind of threw this out as a test because we started talking about books. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. This was years ago. And in my mind, I was thinking he would come back and say, oh, well, it's pretty hard. Like there's a lot you have to do. Like I thought he might
Yeah.
discourage me. But he immediately said, you should. And
Wow.
I was kind of like almost shell shocked. I kind of so I doubled down and said, yeah, but I'm worried like maybe the book's already been written and like what's the
Yeah.
point? just kind of like giving him an out to like, no, it's okay to just tell me I can't do it. But he didn't. He got real serious and looked in my face and said, "Hey, man, nobody can write your book but you. So
Wow.
got to do it." And I just remember, and there have been a few kind of interactions like that where those people that in my mind were kind of in that other category of creative, um, really just encouraged me and kind of
Mhm.
said without saying, "Hey, welcome, you belong here, and I'm glad you're here." And to
Yeah.
me, that was just like, okay, I can do this.
Amazing. That is amazing. Let me ask you this. Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that you are excited about sharing with anybody?
So the big focus for me right now is I just started season 2 of my podcast, which is called again the Yet podcast. I've kind of started off with a broad focus on any type of creative person, but I've lately been narrowing it down specifically to writers since I'm writing.
Hmm.
So I'll continue that. I'm going to continue my work in progress novel. I've also started a couple other drafts. I haven't gotten far into these other ones, but as these ideas have come up, I was like, let me just put down a couple of pages and see where this goes. So that's another tip, by the way, to battle writer's block. If you're stalled out on one, you can do work on another.
Yeah,
So I don't know when any of this is going to come to fruition, but those are some of the things that I'm thinking about right now.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Can you share where anybody can come and find you too? Your website, social media?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So my website is tcburr.com. That's tcburr.com. I've got links to my podcast there. I have a blog that I've been working on there. I've also got a little sample of my story. So if somebody wants to read a page of what I've been working on, they can do that. And then I'm most active on Instagram and Threads, and that is Yet Podcast, all one word.
Awesome. Love that. I also love threads. That's
It's
a great
great.
place to be.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I think this has been a great conversation, and I really
It has.
appreciate you allowing me to come on your show. It's been great talking, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I don't think there's anything else.
Awesome. Well, I would love for you to share the letter you wrote to the audience.
Sure, I'd love to. Dear indie author, first and foremost, I want to tell you I'm thankful for you and for the work that you're doing. It takes incredible courage to pour your heart and soul into something, to make yourself vulnerable by sharing your story. The world desperately needs more great stories, and I'm so thankful that you've chosen to share yours. It won't be without challenges. I'm sure you've faced some already, but it will be worth it. Imagine that day when you hold the bound, finished copy of the book in your hand, or when you read that first 5-star review from a real life reader, not your family members or your best friends. In the tough moments, keep that picture in mind. While I want you to never lose sight of the big picture vision, I also want to encourage you to be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace, take breaks when you need them, and recognize that you haven't missed your chance. You're not too late. You are right on schedule. Rest is an essential part of the creative process, so never beat yourself up for allowing time away to breathe, whether it's a day, a week, or even a decade. Enjoy the process, celebrate every milestone, persevere in the trials. Your voice matters, your story matters, and no one can tell your story but you. I can't wait to read it.
Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Shonda Ramsey. For the show notes and links, head over to shondaramsey.com. And don't forget to join in on the conversation on socials. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a show and write a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, always remember, every writer deserves to see their words in print.